Hey, welcome back to From the Garoffice with Micah Foster, where we talk about faith in the digital space. Today, I have a special privilege of speaking to a pastor in Dubai, Jeremy Cole, who used to be an airline pilot and quit that industry, quit that job to pursue pastoring a church in Dubai, a very multicultural place, and they've had to innovate a lot. So without any further ado, here's Jeremy. So here's Jeremy, and as I said in the intro, he used to be a pilot, and now he is a pastor. So he's got that pilot-pastor alliteration going on. But Jeremy, why don't you give us some context for where you're at and what you're doing?
Well, thanks so much, Micah. Yes, I was a pilot for 20 years. I worked in the airline industry. My last job was a captain on the Boeing 777 for Emirates. Flown all over the world. I actually landed the 777 in 62 different countries.
Wow.
Something like 13,000 hours. So had a wonderful career. Honestly, I never wanted to be a pastor. It was never on my radar. And then I guess about 3 years ago, God told me to quit being a pilot and be a pastor. And so I went and told my wife, hey, God's telling me to quit, be a pastor. And she was like, does God know I'm pregnant? Because we were pregnant with our second kid. And so, yeah, big change. But it's been a great one that constantly we've seen God just show us this is exactly what we're meant to do. And
Awesome.
So it's been challenging, super challenging.
Yeah.
I had to grow a lot as a leader and just as a person from coming from a pilot to a pastor. Pastor's job, I tell you, if you're a pastor, your job is so complex, so hard. Much admiration for every single pastor out there.
So as a pilot, you push a button and generally it does what you tell it to do.
Yes.
And as a pastor, that's not how it works. There's no button.
Yeah. As a pilot, you have like systems and procedures. You're like, you do this, and this, and this is the outcome that you're going to get. And as a pastor, no, people are different. They're emotional beings. I mean, that was really one of my biggest challenges when I started being a pastor was to learn better emotional intelligence. Because when I was a pilot, it'd be me and maybe one other guy. That was my first officer that we kind of had similar personalities. We were kind of doing the same thing, very systematic. And I had a bunch of cabin crew in the back, but honestly, we didn't have to deal with them very often.
Right.
And so my emotional intelligence was not great. I came out, from being a pilot to a pastor and was very ambitious. Like, we're going to do this, we're going to go gung ho.
Right.
And I only had one person working with me at that time. And she was a complete opposite of me. And so I pushed her in ways that she's not wired to be pushed that way.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to put her into places where she wasn't made to excel in those areas.
Mm-hmm.
And so I made her cry a few times that I didn't know about. She just told me later on.
Oh, no.
So I had a lot of learning that I needed to do.
Yeah, I think anytime we pass on to a next season, we look back and go, wow, I needed to learn a lot. So now in a year or two, we're going to be like, man, I really needed to learn a lot from right now. And that's just how it goes. The growth is continual.
Yeah.
So tell me, because on this podcast, we talk a lot about kind of how people have innovated and used and utilized technology through the COVID-19 pandemic. And tell us where you're at in Dubai with that. What does that look like for you guys now?
Well, we were similar to other churches. We didn't have an online ministry prior to the shutdown. We did, God had placed some key people in our church prior to the pandemic. So we had a great, bones of a system that could be created. But we were caught off guard just about like everyone else. And we pivoted very, very quickly, made a service happen. Within 3 days, we were able to put our first service together. And it looked great. It sounded great. I think we've gotten better as time has gone. Learned a ton of lessons along the way of just how to how to make things look good and sound good. But I think what we also learned throughout that time was that no matter how good it sounds, no matter how good it looks, it's really the content that matters. It's the connection that you're able to create with the audience, hopefully through that good content, something that connects to their heart. That's really the most important part, I feel like, for a lot of online experiences.
Yeah. So where are you guys at now with it? So first of all, you guys have Friday. Is that right? Friday night services?
Yes, yeah, Friday morning. So here in the Middle
Friday
East,
morning.
I'm in Dubai, and in the Middle East, the weekends are Friday, Saturday, and so everybody has off Friday, but many people work 6 days a week, and so they're not able to meet on a Friday. So we have our church services on a Friday morning because that's when the most people can actually come to church.
Right. And so now you guys have started up in-person services again? Is that where you're at, or where you
Yeah,
at?
so we have started our in-person services again, and we're meeting in a venue that's really one of the only venues here in Dubai that's allowing churches to meet in person. 90+% of the churches are not meeting in Dubai, and so that's caused some great things. It's caused some challenges as well. Obviously, we've had a ton of visitors
Sure.
every single week because of that, I think. But so we're meeting in person. We're doing online as well, and kind of one of the things that I guess really a journey that I've been on for about 2 years. I was driving to, when I first started this whole pastor thing, you have to have a residence visa to live here in Dubai. And so I was in that kind of transitional phase, and I was driving to Oman, the next country next door. It's about an hour and a half, hour, 45-minute drive. And you would leave the country, come back in, and renew your residence visa. And on one of those trips, I like to be productive. And so I would listen to a podcast, I'd listen to a book. And on my way out there, I was listening to this book called Great at Work. And in the book, he says one of the ways to be great at work is to reinvent your job and change it up a little bit. And he began to tell of a story of a principal at a school in Detroit. This is probably about 15 years ago. And, Detroit back then, it was really suffering. It was not good economic times for Detroit. Crime rate was up, it was just difficult economically. And so these kids that were in his school, they came from lower economic situations, and his school was failing. Kids were going home. They weren't doing their homework. They're worried about eating, taking care of themselves,
Right.
because their parents are probably out working. And so he's afraid of losing his job because his school is in like the bottom 3% of all the schools in Detroit. And so he's like, I got to do something. Well, besides being a principal, he was also a baseball coach. Before his practices, he began filming YouTube videos to help his kids learn before they come to practice. So maybe if the ball gets hit to left field, this is how all the defensive players need to move to make sure that a runner doesn't score. The kids, they would watch it at home or wherever they were. And when they'd show up to practice, they just put into practice what they'd already learned online.
Interesting.
And he began to see that his baseball practices became more efficient, and they started winning more games. And so what he decided is like, well, if that worked for my baseball team, maybe that might work for my school. And so he began to do a test program where he would record his lessons ahead of time. And then he would have the kids watch it at home, maybe on the bus, wherever they were, whenever they had free time. And when they showed up to school, they would then do their homework in class together with the help of a teacher. He flipped the model of schooling and I remember distinctly as I was going down that road, and I'm processing the internet, how internet has changed everything from how we shop to how we get our groceries, church now. It's changed everything. And I began to think to myself, I was like, I wonder if some of those principles will work for church, because I knew that the church is changing, the internet has changed everything, and the stats are not good for younger generations coming back to church. And I knew if we continue to do the same things, we're going to continue to get the same results. And so God kind of started me on this process of almost 2 years of kind of looking at the future of church. And this is even before COVID happened. And I think what I've learned throughout these 2 years, the thing that I think, if it boils down to one thing, it's really use the internet for what it's best designed to be used for. When I think about that, it's like convenience. It's 24/7 on demand. It's reaching a wider audience than you can get in the building. That's connecting with people who physically can't come to the building. I think those are the best things that the internet can provide, and really how it's best designed to be used for. And then when I think about in-person services, I think that's best designed for is like face-to-face community, worship experiences, being able to put a hand on someone and pray. Creating had to be there experiences where you just had to be there in person to see it. More God-filling moments that are well explained. And that really set the foundation for me to think about the church of the future and how we want to proceed in the future as a church, and really began this discussion of, okay, well, if that's what the internet's best used for, and if that's what in-person services are best used for, how do we not just restart church? How do we relaunch church? And it's been exciting and scary. We're not going to get it all right. We're going to fail probably a lot, but I think it's an exciting thing to try to figure out the future of church.
So that's awesome. And I've talked to a lot of people who've had a lot of similar ideas and thoughts. And I hadn't heard that story about that principal, which is really cool. But thinking about that, so he gave them a lot of information, and then they came together and applied it. And so in typical church world, you come together and get a lot of information and then hope they apply it. You just hope they do something about it. Yeah. And you're like, okay, here's the one thing I want you to do. And it's only one thing. And hopefully if you do it through this week, then we could build on that next week with a new thing to add on to that. And over time, you become more and more like Christ doing that. And the Holy Spirit has got an active role in all that, right?
Correct.
But having that idea that what if they got a lot of their information from what we do online, and then we come together and learn how to apply it together. That's an interesting concept, practice it together, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it kind of went back to that. What is the internet best used for, and what is the in-person best used for? When I want to learn something, I go to YouTube. That's where I kind of learn and grow. You can do it on demand whenever you want, to your convenience. And so that is kind of how I learn. And then when I want to, I guess, grow and experience it, everybody grows in different ways. Some people grow from watching and learning. Some people grow by actually doing. So, so one of the things that we're trying at Mosaic is we don't necessarily meet every single week in the church building. So some weeks we'll actually go, and as a church, entire church will go and volunteer in the community. Another thing we do park days. We call them Love Thy Neighbor Park Days. So we don't have church in the building. We go out to the park, we grill burgers, we play games, and we say invite your non-Christian friends, because we want to show the love of Jesus to them, not in a church setting, but in a place where they'll feel comfortable and loved regardless of who they are. And then hopefully in that place, we'll then invite them to church, and they'll experience the love that we have as Christians that's flowing out of us. And then, it's a first step. It's an easier first step. Another thing we do church on a boat. So, we are a smaller church. We averaged about 90 people average attendance prior to COVID. And we rented out a big, huge boat, put 125 on it, and went out and went down the canals and looked at the Burj Khalifa, the world's tallest building. And we played some music, we did testimonies. And it was a different way of doing church, all to kind of just try to experiment, try to think differently about how we do church.
Yeah. I mean, you think about the way that Jesus spoke to people, the way that he gathered people, the way he taught people, and it was vastly different all the time. He wasn't in the synagogue most of the time. you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Good
so
point.
that is really interesting and good to remember. So what is the frequency, like ratio frequency of how often you guys meet in sort of your more traditional fashion, have your service in that building that you rent, and
Mm.
then how often are you doing something different?
We do about an average about 6 to 7 weeks in the building, and then we'll
Mm-hmm.
go do something outside the building. So we'll, I think our next thing is church on a boat. If COVID allows, we're not really sure if COVID restrictions are going to ease up, but if they do a little bit, then yeah, we're going to go do church on a boat.
Uh-huh.
And then another thing that we're coming up, we're going to rent out an entire restaurant, and we're going to serve some food, and we're going to have kind of some more testimony times in a restaurant, and kind of just take church to the people rather than in the building.
Wow.
But yeah, to answer your question, 6 or 7 weeks is typical. During the summer, we take a little bit of break because it is super hot in Dubai. And
Like, what do you mean by super hot? Tell me a number. Give me a number.
Number. Okay, average summer heat here is probably about 110. And what happens is Dubai is made up of expat communities. So people will leave during the summer because it's so hot, and the kids are out of school. They go back to their home countries. And so, Dubai kind of is a totally different place in the summer. And so we take a couple of weeks, we call it our Sabbath, in the middle of July, just to kind of take it easy, let our staff recover, and kind of prepare a little bit for the future.
Okay, so it's similar in Fresno, where I'm at. In that, it's, it can be anywhere from 105 to 115 during the summer. All summer long, it's dry, so that's good. Because if you're in the south, that would be like, it would feel like 300 degrees. So there's that. But kids are out of school, and so everyone goes to the coast of the mountains, like almost every weekend. They're just like, yeah, we're going to the coast, we're going to the mountains. So weekends in the summer are, especially for smaller churches, are historically like horrible times, in terms of how many people come to your gatherings. So we've had some different experiments that we've done through that. And, we've done after parties where we provide popsicles and drinks and that sort of thing after the service. And that was fun, create a community. This is pre-COVID, right? And now our county is entering into a phase where they're allowing, in small increments, they're increasing the amount of people that can meet indoors for church services. And so it was like 25%. I think they're moving it a little bit. I think it's like 40% or something now, but still recommended. Don't sing, everyone wear masks. But the churches who are actually meeting in person, I don't think care. So about those things. So they just kind of let people do what they want to do. But now we've got the vaccine rolling out. I get my second shot on Friday for the Moderna vaccine, which the first shot took me out. So I'm kind of expecting to be out for a day or two, because our family had COVID in December. And so if you've had it, apparently the shot kind of brings up some of that stuff, and then you get better, but you get better faster. Anyway, so we've experimented with some different things. A couple things we've done is something we called Zoo Cities Church instead of Two Cities Church, which is our church name. And we met at the zoo. And so we had sort of everybody meet at the zoo, bring your lunch, sack lunch, and we'll create an itinerary where we are walking around doing these things together, going to the stingrays, going to see the bird show, whatever. And funny story, on the bird show, these birds fly over you, they've trained them to do different tricks and stuff. A giant owl flies over my father-in-law and smacks him in the forehead. And it was just, it was hilarious. And he is the wrong guy to have that happen. Like in that moment, he goes, I should never have come. That was his, and he's like, and I'm never coming back, basically is the two thoughts that came through his head. But everybody else enjoyed it. And the kids had a blast. We do taco truck at the park and different things of that nature at different times. But we've always been tethered to pretty much like Sunday service happens on Sunday morning in the same place consistently. And there's been a lot of thought processes about that because it's predictable, right? And guests know where you are all the time. if they're thinking about coming, they're not checking to see if you're meeting they're just going to show up. So there's a lot of things behind that, and tradition is behind that. But recently, we've been rethinking a lot of that. And part of it is the amount of energy it takes to create that experience at the level we want to create it versus, when you go do something in the community, in our case, it takes a lot less preparation from the volunteer portion of the people. And it's not the same old kind of thing. And so there's a new excitement about it. And so people are more willing to invite. So there's a lot of different things going on with that. So we've been rethinking a lot of that. And because we've been able to do pretty good consistently online with the content we're producing. Not everybody watches together, but a lot of people watch the replay or in an on-demand fashion. Because people are growing through that, we've been like, okay, so maybe we should lean into that more and also create communal experiences in person that are different than what we would normally do. So it could be going to the park. It could be going to the zoo. It could be going, all kinds of places. When the movie theaters open up, it seems to be that there's more, actually there's more family-friendly or even Christian-produced movies that are available in the theaters, even if it's for a 2-week stint or something. And there could be ways that we could engage the community in a different way, create community. And really the goal is not to get them to come to a worship service as much as it is to get them into small communities that would then digest the content together and apply it together. So, for instance, at our home right now, this is all theory. That's why it doesn't sound very concrete to you. At our home right now, we're doing watch parties. So we'll invite a few families over, and it varies who shows up and how many people are here. But we have a watch party on Sunday morning to watch the service together. All the kids that are here play during that time, do whatever in the front yard. We watch the service as adults. Then we call the kids over, and we have a kids thing that we watch together from the Rethink group, puts out curriculum many of us use. And so we watch a YouTube show they create for older kids, for like preteens. And then I lead a discussion and prayer with those kids around one central question. They give one Bible story. And then afterwards, the last couple of weeks, we've been barbecuing hot dogs and hamburgers and letting the kids swim because we have a pool. So it's been just like this. I think if church was like that simple for a lot of people, they'd be like, oh, this is fun. It's a barbecue. It's like a barbecue at someone's home. It's like a party that I get to go to. My kids have a great time. They learn something. I learned something. So we're trying out, like, I'm trying to encourage other people, like, do your own watch party, guys. Like, you can invite your friends and family over, make it really low pressure. The only awkward part is that you watch the service together. And it's only awkward if people don't expect that to be a part of the deal. So so people are coming over and watching it with us, and it's awkward for me because I'm watching myself with other people. So I always have to preface, like, my wife's already made fun of me for this part or whatever, and, you can make fun of me too. But it's just something that I've found very fulfilling right now, life-giving. I'm not running around trying to get everything done and ready for these people to come over because it's my home and pretty much everything's done. We just got to make sure it's clean. And it's just a different, the pressure is not so high and intense in this season. And so I'm really enjoying that. So I don't know how it's all going to play out, but our leadership team is really talking about some really different outside the box expressions of being the church. And I'm enjoying that conversation. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like you guys have done some similar things in trying to think differently and try to create differently. And one of the things that really is driving some of that for me is I've seen volunteers come, and then we lean on those volunteers very heavily because they're good people. They show up, but then they end up doing everything. And there's not a lot of people to replace them or to be mentored by them. And so we end up, a couple of people have just burnt out because they've been so involved and so engaged in all that stuff. And then what's really interesting is that it's real sudden and without warning. They're just like, I can't do it. And so I'm really trying to think through, how do we make this less pressure for people, more enjoyable for people? Because I think that is what the church should be. It shouldn't be so hard. I think it doesn't have to be so hard. I think that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
We make it pretty hard sometimes.
I think we've all made that mistake of burning out volunteers. It's so easy to do because, volunteering is tough. You touched on a few things that I think are important. You talked about community. You're creating it there at your house, and when I talked earlier about what's good for the internet, what's good for in-person, and in-person is the best place for community. And if you think about the way that we've been doing church for the past 20, 30 years, there's a welcome, 3 songs maybe, a giving time, a sermon, and goodbye. And if you look at that, there is zero community built into that whole thing. Maybe if you say hello to someone around you. And when I ask people why they come to church, it's typically a couple different things. One is because they want to grow in their relationship with Jesus. And the other is because they want friends. They want community. And we really haven't, as a church, we have not created places for them to create community. But yet that's what in-person is best used for. And so we're doing some interesting things where we break up a lot into groups. So we'll have instead of a 30 or 40-minute sermon, we'll have a 20-minute sermon or 15 minutes, and then we'll break up into groups, and we'll have 2 or 3 discussion questions. Okay, how do you relate that sermon to us here today? And through those conversations, people are able to be like, oh, I think I like this guy. This guy's smart. I think I might get along with him. And so the reason we're doing those is because we're trying to create opportunities for community to form. We do similar things with prayer. So we'll break up into groups, and okay, we're going to have a time of prayer. In your group, you're going to just say your prayer request. If you don't have one, it's okay. You don't have to have one for yourself. But after about 10 minutes, we're just going to pray for everybody in that group. What you're doing is you're opening up, you're creating conversations, you're creating connections with other people in the group, because people want community. They want to be known. They want to be cared for, no matter where you're from. So that's one thing that we're doing. Another kind of thing of volunteers that we're trying out is we've taken a growth track from the art churches. And the basic concept is kind of like you give vision about your church and who you are. Then you talk about people and their personalities and how they're wired. And then the ultimate goal, week 4, is to get them either in a group or in volunteering in a volunteer role. So we've reduced it from 4 weeks to 2 weeks. We call it A Better Life. And we say it's clear next steps to meet good people and connect with God. And we, the first week, we talk about our vision, how we're different as a church, where we're headed as a church. And then we give them those clear next steps. The next step is come next week. We're going to give you free food. We're going to play some games. And what we're doing with the games is that for let's say for the children's minister, they're going to talk a little bit about their ministry, and then we're going to play a game that relates to their ministry. For set up, tear down, we're going to talk about that ministry. We're going to play a game about, I think for this week, we're giving them toothpicks and marshmallows, and whoever builds the biggest tower in 2 minutes, they win the game. And so we're playing kind of fun, interactive games with a purpose of getting people to volunteer and getting people into groups. And, we had 15 people our first for week 1 of A Better Life last week. This week, we have about 35 signed up for day 2. So that's 35 potential volunteers that are going to be signing up to get into a ministry. Because what I've found is that if you can get someone involved and making friendships, mm-hmm. being a part of a team early on, after, I think the stats say, it's after 3 months. After 3 months, the chance of someone volunteering falls all the way to 5% or 10%. It's something terribly low. So if we can get those new people into volunteer positions early on, you have a greater chance of them sticking around and becoming a part of your church. And so that's a kind of a way that we're working on building relationships and getting people to volunteer. Because, like you said, it's so easy to burn people out. I've done it. I've done it myself. And like you said, it's quick and abrupt. And you're like, who am I going to put in their place?
And it can even be an exit to the whole community. They sometimes it's not just, hey, I need to not volunteer for a bit. I need to take a breather. Sometimes it's, I can't even be here because I'll start to feel like I need to do something. And so, you know what I mean? So
that's exactly it. They feel bad about it. They feel bad and they don't want to feel that. They don't want to feel that way.
A few years ago, we had one volunteer that took a step back, right? And I was like, I've seen this happen a couple of times. We should create like a track or something for people who want to take a step back. Like, okay, here's a way for you to reset, or like, here's a couple of resources, maybe a book to go through or whatever. But then it was like, then we're trying to program their rest or their hopeful return. And so it was like, it's feeling too, it's a little weird, so
it didn't feel real.
It didn't feel right. So we didn't do it. But in this season, volunteerism is real low for us because we don't need a lot of volunteers to do a lot of things. And so we're giving everyone so much space and so much, like, we're not asking you to do anything except watch with us, engage with us, hopefully in one of our groups, invite somebody, share this to your feed, and live out what we're talking about. So I think for me, the lesson in this season is, if they have a sense of obligation to the church, if there's going to be a sense of obligation, I don't want it to be around making church happen. I want it to be around living out what we talk about. I don't want it to be like, I volunteered at my church, and so I've pretty much checked my Christian bubble, right? I'm good. Like that's the bottom of the ladder there, and they stop there because it's like, okay, I've checked that off. So I think there's a danger for a lot of people to be there. So, and it takes leadership to make sure that's not happening. But in this season, we've been able to give people tons and tons of freedom. I used to be like, if I hear someone's going to be out of town, in the back of my brain, I'm going, oh no, they do this and this. Now I've got to make that happen somehow. And now I'm like, you're going to be out of town? Awesome. Tune in. I don't care where you're at. You can tune in. I want you to enjoy yourself. My family has been out of town, and I'm hosting the chat and online with people while we're watching and engaging with people. And then the service is done and we go to the beach or whatever. And so it's been a really fun season for that sort of thing. So anyway, I don't know what everything looks like moving forward past all of this, but it's been a really interesting season for us. And we've saved tons of money this past year. Just sure. Yes. It's unreal the amount of money we don't have to spend right now, and that's been a huge blessing. Yeah.
Well, one thing I would suggest, something that I learned from my church being shut down. This is actually the second time that we got shut down. The first time we got shut down because of the government of Dubai got mad at a particular church. They were doing some wrong things. They shut down all the churches. And so we were shut down for about a month and a half. And what we did after that month and a half, we just went straight back to what we were doing before. And we kind of hurt our volunteers during that time. So, I kind of learned the lesson. This time, what we did was, instead of meeting back, going straight to weekly services, we kind of built it up. We did a couple of weeks a month until we got to where we felt like our volunteers were in a place where they were ready to come back, and then started having weekly services. And even prior to that, launching for the very first time in person, we gathered our volunteers together and we celebrated them. We did a Christmas party, and we just had lots of fun. We bought meals for them. We had a white elephant gift exchange, and just really built into them, preparing for the season of, we know that this is coming up at some point soon.
Right.
And we want to launch well. So that was a lesson that I learned from the first time we got shut down, that I'm sure a lot of churches in the United States are are thinking that through that if they're not already meeting. And so that was something I learned and something that was helpful for us.
That's good, man. I think that's wise advice. I was on a call with someone yesterday and they used this phrase 2 different times. They said crawl, walk, run. It's 2 different times.
Yeah.
And it seemed to be part of their normal vernacular that they just say that. But yeah, that's the really thing. It's baby steps. You gauge and evaluate as you go, and you make adjustments based on not only what you see, but what is needed. And I think that's really good. I think there's just a ton of opportunity for innovation and to think differently. Because if somebody wants a traditional meeting schedule, what it looks like, church, they can find that. They're everywhere. They're everywhere. But if they're looking for something different, and in particular, I'm seeing a lot of people deconstructing their faith online right now in like an open forum. A lot of people on TikTok are deconstructing the faith that they grew up with, no matter what their background was. And in an absence of going to a physical space and being a part of that community, they've found space in their life to question everything. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, because I think they probably need to reconstruct part of that. I think that probably there's some things that should be deconstructed and reconstructed differently. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to give people space, to help them in that process, to let them know they're not alone. And if we're going to really do that, then probably how we do things should look a little bit different, just so there's not that automatic association. You're just like everything I grew up with, which I now don't want to be. So there's a lot of opportunity out there, I think.
Yeah, and I think people are willing to change. I think COVID gave us the perfect excuse. Now we don't have to go back to doing the way that we've been doing things before. And whenever I cast vision about this new type of church to my people, or people that come, you can kind of see it in their eyes. They're like, wow, that sounds kind of exciting. They want to be a part of something new. They want to be a part of something different and exciting. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of potential
for sure,
in doing something different.
So now you have this ability, you have these systems you've built. So if the government shuts down churches again, which, I mean, what do you think the possibility is of that happening in your area is?
I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think they want bad press. Dubai is very conscious of their reputation, and for them to shut down a church would not be good for them. And so I think they're going to continue to say no to some churches, but some of the smaller churches like mine, we're not worth really dealing with them. They're like, you're too small, it doesn't really matter. And so they're going to allow us to meet. And what we're going to do, we're going to meet, but we're going to be respectful, and we're going to not raise our head too far above the crowd, because when you raise your head too far above the crowd, eventually it gets chopped off. And so we don't want to do that. So we'll stick our head a little bit above the crowd, and then we'll come back down. And then we'll stick it above again and come back down. And try to reach as many people as possible. And online, you can do that. So if we get shut down again, we've got a great team, honestly. Our band is amazing. Our camera people, the people that are putting it all together. We don't look like a church of 90, I promise you. We look like a much larger church. And that's kind of a great thing, because the internet people don't really know. It really doesn't. If you look at Instagram, when they first started, I think there was like 9 or 11 employees that grew to hundreds of thousands of users, but they only had like 9 or 11 employees. And so you can actually have a big online ministry with a small amount of staff.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So being that your church is made up of, it's very international, there's people from everywhere, which is the makeup of Dubai, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did that impact your online presence? Because they have their own connections all over the world. Did you find people tuning in from other places just because they had that personal connection?
It's so hard to answer that question, because I really don't know. I know that, my people, some of them were connecting to us. Some of them might be watching someone else. We had multiple people watching from Australia, from Spain, like friends of friends type of thing.
Right.
And that initially all happened at the beginning.
Yes.
I think that's tapered off a little bit now, I would say. I would say that the people that are watching now are our core people. And now that we've transitioned to having an in-person service and an online service, I think it's even transitioned to even a smaller amount of people. It's more like people that, for whatever reason, they can't get the vaccine and they don't want to meet in person because they feel like it's not safe. It's people that can't physically go. So we've seen our online viewership continue to go down as we meet in person. And I think that's probably natural. I think it'll probably reach a certain point and it will kind of stay at that level. But we continue to put out, the best content that we can. Our services, we try to keep them around that 30-minute mark, really just one song typically, and a sermon, maybe some discussion questions around it. Because whenever I watch YouTube, I don't watch an hour and 15-minute show or hour and 30-minute show. I'm watching 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, maybe max. And so that's how I consume content online. And so I think as churches, we need to ask ourselves, what are the behaviors of people online? And are we actually meeting their needs? Are we putting stuff out that people are searching for and they're kind of looking to do? What do you guys do? Do you use Facebook? Or do you use YouTube? Do you something else?
Yeah, so we are Facebook, YouTube. So when we first started, I was broadcasting live a pre-recorded service through Ecamm Live, through Restream, to 5 different services. And what I found was, because of the internet and because of outages or because of issues, that was just too unstable. So since then, we've gone to a premiere on Facebook and then a post on YouTube. So it actually posts, like it's scheduled to post at 6 a.m. Pacific on YouTube, and then we premiere our service at 10:30 a.m. on Facebook. So if somebody wants to watch early, they can do that. But we try to get people to come to the Facebook premiere. And the reason for that is because we have chat going the whole time. The comments are happening during the thing the whole time. So that's the best experience I've found for our people. Now, you could use a church online, all that stuff, which is great and has great features, but I just find it's an extra step. Like, people have to click out of somewhere else if they're not going to stumble upon it, in other words. Whereas when we're on Facebook and premiering, people are constantly stumbling upon it while it's premiering, and people are more likely to share it and all that sort of thing. That's just our context. That's not everybody. So yeah. I see the pluses and minuses. We just chose to do this as our avenue. Our time frame is typically 30 minutes. Try to keep it around that 30-minute mark. If we can get a couple minutes shorter, we'll do it. Message is, max 20 minutes, but it does better in the 13, 14, 15-minute range. And I'm trying to get almost the same amount of teaching or content that I would if I were in person doing 40 minutes. But I'm doing it in 15 to 20 online. So it's got me thinking, when I speak in person, I'm probably going to be shorter. Hopefully I'm going to be shorter. So that's kind of our thing. And maybe 1 or 2 songs. The one thing that I feel like has been a really good thing for us is we have a volunteer host each week. So I send a camera guy. He gets someone to say, "Hey, welcome to Two Cities Online. My name is so-and-so, and I'll be your host today. We just want to let you know our mission." And then their only other job is to say something personal that God is teaching them, and then kick it over to me. That's it. That's all they got to do. It probably takes, once they get set up with the camera, it probably takes 15 minutes to record all of it. And then they record a vertical video that's just a social post that we can post after the services. Says, hey, thanks for watching today. I was your host. And they just say a few things. And then I put some notes when we post it online. But that's kind of it. And then this last week, I did something different where I had a section that I had cut out from the message. So I just decided to record that real quick and release that as a social post later and say, hey, this is a little extra, something to make it into the service today. And I posted that like 5 or 6 hours later into Sunday evening. So people had a little chunk. So even if they missed everything we did, they probably watched that 2-minute video. Yeah. They probably watched a 2-minute video. Because I said, hey, just a quick 2 minutes. I want to give you something extra. So anyway, we're just trying to continually do things like that. And so we have about 10 people we rotate through who do the hosting. And I've actually had one time I had someone in Oregon do it for us, someone who had watched a couple of times. So in my brain, I'm like, man, if I could get hosts from other places to be a volunteer host online, that suddenly opens and unlocks people's brains a little bit more to what's possible. So
yeah, I like that.
And if I'm going to be somewhere, if I'm going to go somewhere, I purposely, before Easter, I took my family to Yosemite for a couple of nights. And so I told my wife beforehand, let's go to Yosemite. Now, part of the reason I want to go to Yosemite is because I want to do our Easter message in Yosemite. And so I was like, cool. I need a chunk of time to do that. And so if we're going to go somewhere, I want to capture a different location, a different look, something that's, makes people who regularly tune in go, something's different here. There's it just catches them off guard or something. So next week, we'll be flying to Waco, Texas to go see a new niece that's been born. And so I plan while we're there that I will record something. It may not be the service, but I'll record something that will give a different context, a different place.
Cool.
And I think that's helpful. I watched this is really funny because that's kind of in my personal playbook for our online ministry, right? If you're going to go to the coast, you better catch some footage because especially if it's a place that people from here frequent, they recognize it, they're more likely to stop and watch it for a few minutes. So that's been in my personal playbook. And then this last Sunday, I watched a local church that's a lot bigger do that thing. They had gone and done an interview with someone in another city, and they had a layover in Vegas. And so the pastor went and did a devotional on the streets of Vegas, and he had a camera guy with him. And so it's super attractive to look at, and everybody stops because it has that cinematic look on the Vegas Strip, and their pastor's talking. So everyone, I guarantee everybody who's a part of that church watched that video, but not everybody who's a part of that church watched the normal sermon. You know what I mean? Because it just looks like the same old thing. So I think we just have to figure out ways to be visually different for the people and take advantage of whatever's going on, whatever we got. The other thing that was really successful for us is when we address things that are really big deals in culture in the moment when it's happening. Mm-hmm. And we probably missed an opportunity by not addressing specifically this past week, having something online specifically about the verdicts that came out over the George Floyd murder. And so we probably missed an opportunity to engage some people that might not otherwise engage with us. So when all the racial tensions were happening early in the pandemic, we had an interview with a police officer in our church who's also Black. And so he had a unique perspective. And so it was just me and him talking and his life experience. And he's on both sides of the equation. And so how should we be thinking about this? And that was probably our highest viewed anything we put out for a year, because it was so relevant and something that people wanted to know about, something they were dealing with. So back to your question, what are the people looking for? What do they want? If we can think that way, it's really helpful. It's hard to do that when you're planning ahead, because something happens and then you got to pivot and switch. Yeah. So it's hard to do that all the time, but I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, those are some great ideas. I think those. I know for us, we went and we filmed out in the desert. Believe it or not, the UAE does have some small mountains, so we went and filmed out in the mountains. One particular week, I did it like a vlog style, where I was in multiple locations and I was like walking and talking at the same time, and kind of took people on this visual journey.
Yeah.
Much harder to do, but people were like commenting, "Wow, this was nice."
Right.
Yeah, great. We did a lot of interviews from, like, you interviewed a police officer. We interviewed some mental health experts. We interviewed some financial people who helped because, the pandemic happened. People were losing their jobs. So we were kind of trying to help people with their finances. But yeah, just being helpful. Really, that's, if we could just be helpful, that's what people are looking for.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, this has been really fun, man. I really appreciate you taking the time, hanging out with me for an hour, and being on the podcast. And I may cut pieces of this and use it for our leadership team or things of that nature as well. And certainly I'll throw your face on TikTok a couple of times. So, so thanks for hanging out with me. I really appreciate you guys, what you've been doing for the kingdom in a place that I've never been. I hope to go there one day. It just looks super cool there.
It is pretty cool.
It's probably be a while before I can get away. 3 kids, all that kind of stuff.
Totally get it.
But thanks, man. Really appreciate you. God bless you in all that you do.
Oh, thank you, Micah. Big fan.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Jeremy Cole, a pastor of Mosaic Church Dubai. And man, what an interesting ministry that is, to be in such a multicultural place, be reaching so many people from so many different countries. I'm just really grateful to know him and thankful that he spent some time with me. So if you enjoyed this podcast, this content, whether you're on YouTube or Spotify or Apple or Anchor or wherever you're watching or listening from, if you enjoyed this, please give it a like, subscribe, give me a review, and share it with your best friends and all the people that you know in your life, because you never know who this information and content might help. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next one.